right, Janelle, thank you so much. Now, I think it's about time to start our panel. So we should have a few panelists in the audience, I'm assuming. Panel number one on truck, selecting a truck. I see Ron, I know Lisa's here. I believe we have maybe Alexa from NFI, and we'll have folks online as well.
Go ahead and bring them in the room.
Anyone, any other panelists? Who do we have online? All right, perfect. Oh, maybe we have, let's see. I'll turn around here. Okay, Alexa's online. Perfect, we've got everybody. All right. So first of all, panelists, thank you guys. I am going to give you a chance in just a moment to introduce yourselves, take a couple minutes, introduce yourself, what your company does, and then we'll start into a quick Q&A, moderated Q&A with me first of all. I've got some questions that we'll go through. And as you've seen in our emails for the panelists and for you folks in the audience, the point today really is to impart the knowledge that you all have gained, whether you be a fleet such as NFI, whether you be, someone like Lisa as a dealer, someone like Ron, with the work they do at Forum, or whatever the case is, to impart the knowledge that you've gained about what the folks in this room who have fleets need to think about as they choose a truck. And whether or not that be a truck that they purchase outright or one they lease or go through a truck as a service provider or whatever the case is, it's really what do they need to think about? And some of the questions hopefully will steer us through that. So let's start with a brief introduction. If we can keep it to about maybe 2 or 3 minutes. We'll start here in the room, and immediately to my left, Ron.
Morning, yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Are you on? Doesn't sound like you're on.
There we go.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ron Hunt with Forum Mobility. For those of you that don't know about us, we provide charging as a service, essentially off-site charging depots with dedicated chargers for the trucking and drayage communities. We focus on the port to distribution corridors here in California initially. We'll be moving around the country as well beyond that. We do offer a lot of help with incentives, with truck leasing, ancillary benefits like that. But our core service is providing that dedicated charging solution since so many struggle with that offering. So we're always glad to learn from others as well as teach what we have learned and help advise and guide our customers towards their zero emissions journey. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you, Ron. And Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa McGee. I'm Zero Emissions Programs and Affairs Manager with Tom's Truck Center. We're a medium heavy duty trailership that's been around since 1949. And we sell many of the technologies today in the zero emission as well as the hydrogen. We've sold over 268 vouchers last year in the program through HFIP program. And we're opening up a depot for heavy duty, medium heavy duty charging through SCE's program that they have, their Charge Ready program. So we stand to be able to support you guys from all of the technical aspects, whether it's learning about the technology or whether it's helping you with submitting rebates, as well as providing solutions. There's a lot of solutions out there. It gets very technical. I come from a background of adopting electric buses. I was an operations manager for a fleet in San Diego. I adopted under there in 2015. I have a long history with working at CPUC as it relates to being involved in proceedings for rate design. This technology gets technical, but I can tell you at the end of the day, if you just drive it, there are benefits. And just getting involved is an ability to start slowly. You don't have to take risks. You can buy one truck through HFIP without scrapping. That can be your truck and you can choose to drive it as much as you want. The fact is, whether you drive it every day or you drive it one time a week, the data is still the same. You're always going to end up with about a 50% savings when it comes to the operational costs. And so there's a lot of good things to come. It gets just technical to get started. So happy to help and share today.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And I do see that Alexa has a hand up. So maybe if there was a question about the presentation, or otherwise we'll just go to you and you can introduce yourself, either one. Alexa.
Show a hand up, so I'm not sure where that shows, but my name is Alexa Branco. I'm with NFI. We are a third-party logistics company offering dedicated transportation, port services, as well as distribution, real estate, and brokerage. I'm our director of sustainability, so I support our corporate sustainability, strategy planning, as well as support our fuel and tolls.
Thank you. And it wasn't your hand up. It was someone's scroll as a hand rather than an arrow. So I apologize.
No worries.
For that.
No,
I think that was crazy. Thank you, Alexa. All right. Let's turn to Jason over at Prologis.
Yes, perfect. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Bruce, for having me, and to the CARB team more broadly. So, the MHD medium heavy duty space is, I think, extremely dynamic, but it's actually very approachable with, the right partnerships and collaborations across the vehicle and charging infrastructure providers. So, really happy that folks are showing up in the room today to kind of explore some of this. So my name is Jason Walter. I lead the Prologis Mobility Hubs division within Prologis, where we're building a high density of fast chargers for multi-tenant public, semi-public contracted use. So think of it as like a home away from home. And Prologis, for those not familiar, we're a global leader in logistics real estate. We have over 3,800 properties in the US alone. And we have nearly 3% of global GDP coming through our properties. And our mobility business supports the more than 6,600 customers we already have within our real estate footprint. And many of those are looking to convert, portions or much of their goods movement to zero emission. Alexa and NFI and their team are some of the partners that we're working with. So we're very grateful to get to be part of this community. And I'll just leave it with our mobility team. We're really solving these challenges across warehouses, on route, but within these industrial clusters where we have, a dozen out of 50 properties within a couple mile radius. And it's really a great spot for people to begin that initial fleet transition. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Kevin from Zero Emission, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Bruce. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here virtually. My name is Kevin Christopher. I'm one of the co-founders of Zero Emission. I'm actually based in Long Beach in Southern California, so apologies for not being there in person today. I was on a work trip to Minneapolis. I think Zero Emission is a company that is focused on providing tools for fleets that are thinking about taking their first step to transition to zero emission vehicles. But the core business is really provided on a fleet management platform that we provide to the fleets such that they can integrate these new vehicles and technologies into their normal operations. Within that platform, we provide a lot of insights and alerts and a framework for better understanding how, especially medium and heavy vehicles need to be charged, how they can be kept on the road, the variables and conditions that may impact their ability to stay on the road. And through that platform, we also provide a lot of reports and insights that help you maybe comply to base HVIP, DOT, CEC, Southern California Edison grant reporting requirements, but also help you think better about the operations, the real world impact that these trucks and vehicles are having to your operation, how you can think about using that data to better plan for future phases of electrification. The thing we like to say, and I think it's been echoed in some of the things of the other panelists, is electrification can be seen as a very complicated technical challenge, but it is very approachable. I think identifying the right use case, aligning yourself with the right partners that can help with whatever you need, whether that's offsite charging infrastructure, on-site, or partners that can help you plan and advise what those next steps might be. So in simple terms, Zero Emission is here to provide support and services to fleets that are, again, looking to take that first step. We do a lot of work with different entities and helping them understand, based on their operational use case, what trucks might be best fit, what's available out there, what grants and incentives might help that, and then doing load studies at the facility, understanding what power do we have, what power might we need, and how you can effectively develop a roadmap to get to your first or several several vehicles as part of a pilot project. So I'll stop there, but again, happy to be here and to support the panel today. Thank you, Bruce.
You. All right. And for our panelists also, just so that you know, obviously we have a mixed, what am I trying to say, kind of mixed media here. We're in person, we have virtual. I want to treat everybody in the virtual world the same as in person. So I'll be looking back and forth at people. If you want to chime in, I will try and ask folks a question to kind of kick off the ball. If you want to chime in with something, please don't worry about the new virtual world of raising your little yellow hand. If there's an opportunity, jump in, or if you just want to raise your real hand, do that. And I'll be looking back and forth. Again, just think of it as if we're all in the same room together. And we do have an audience online so that you know. We'll do about half an hour of moderated Q&A with the panel. Then after that, we will turn it over to questions from the members of the actual audience here. Unfortunately, we won't get to questions from the virtual audience because we just won't have time. But we will be doing other events like this. And we have different sessions on some of the pieces of the regulation and so forth. So there's always opportunities to ask us questions in person, even if you're not, or fit to ask us specifically questions, even if you're not in person. But all right, let's start. All right, so, one of the things that I hear a lot, and I'm really lucky, I get to go to all kinds of events, truck shows, went to the ACT Expo last week, if anybody knows what that is. Amazing place to go to see zero emission vehicles and technology. Most of the people on our panels were there last week. I go out and talk to truck drivers at little events like CHP weigh stations and so forth. One of the questions, and I think everybody in here knows the question, one of the questions I hear all the time is, what kind of trucks are available for me? There's nothing out there. There's nothing. I need a utility bed. There's nobody that makes a utility bed. I need a Class 8 truck. All I can get is, really low mileage Class 8 trucks, if I can get one at all, or it takes me months and months to get one. So I'm going to turn it over to our dealer representative and ask Lisa to start. What the heck is out there, and can we get them easily?
So the quick answer to that is yes. HVIP lists a huge inventory of different types of vehicles from Class 2B to Class 8, hydrogen and zero emission. I think Nicola's the only one delivering hydrogen today. Tom's Trucks is one of those dealers. We've delivered about 50 units so far. We've got about another 100 to deliver in our pipeline this year. And when it comes to the legacy vehicles, you're going to start seeing Ford, Volvo, Toyota. Many of the Hino launched at Advanced Clean Truck Expo last week. So you're going to see a lot of legacy vehicles being delivered now by the OEMs that you traditionally know. But the market really started with the vertical market, and there's a lot that you can visit and find on the inventory with HVIP.
Thank you. And Lisa, you mentioned HVIP, and I just want to put in a plug for that. While today's sessions don't include a training on our incentive programs, HVIP, the Hybrid Voucher Incentive Program, although it doesn't cover hybrids anymore, is our main zero emission incentive fund. We have folks right outside here. Our folks are out there to talk to you about the rule and so forth. Right outside, there will be folks from someone that works very closely with us that oversees our HVIP program, also something called Cal Fleet Advisor that gives you technical information on zero emission vehicles and infrastructure and so forth. Then we have a lot of vendors. I think most of you saw them back there, and some trucks outside that will give you that information. But be aware there are incentive funds available. Go talk to the folks at CalStart. Again, you'll see them right outside. Throw in anything about different vehicles that are. What do you have to say on that?
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely lots of vehicle options. There's more and more coming in the marketplace right now. Forum focuses primarily on Class 8 heavy duty. Some of our charging depots, many of them will actually accommodate other classes of vehicles when it's suited. But for the Class 8 space, Lisa had mentioned a few of them, of course, with Nikola and Volvo being mentioned. You've got Freightliner, the PACCAR products of Kenworth and Peterbilt, as well as BYD. And at ACT last week, there was a couple of announcements with Navistar International's new Class 8 as well as Lion Electric. So we're pretty much going from, a handful to several options in the Class 8 heavy duty space when it comes to battery electric in particular. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of good options. To some points made earlier, it's just about starting to understand your duty cycles and use cases, where you're going to start this journey at, and starting to understand the different models of trucks, because they do vary as far as their range capabilities and their weights, which are usually the biggest factors in deciding where to go with the trucks, along with obviously so many other things like parts and service, warranties, cost, and all these other things.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ron. And you actually couldn't have given me much better of a segue. So we know there's trucks available. We know there's folks out there that can help you. And one of the things you'll probably hear from at least a couple of our folks, and you've heard a little bit as they introduce what their company does, is if you're not ready to buy a truck, there are options out there for you. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. But there's a lot of things that go into deciding what kind of truck you want, or I shouldn't say you want, what truck will work best for you. My opinion, and I've been lucky, I worked on the advanced clean fleet regulations since just about the beginning. As I said, I talked to a lot of fleets. I got thrown into the world of infrastructure right away. One of the things that I believe is you don't necessarily need the truck that you think you need. And so we're here a little bit to talk about that today. And in line with that, then what I'm going to do is turn to Chris at Zero Emission, because that's one of the things that they do, is kind of help you look at what you do, what your truck does, and then they will give you information, and the other people on this panel could give you information. So Chris, would you talk about that a little bit? What do you need to know?
Sure, Bruce, thank you. I think you said it well in the beginning. So identifying the right battery capacity for the truck, I think, is very use case dependent. We've worked with a lot of customers that earlier on in their electrification journey had maybe a lot of range anxiety, and inappropriately, because technologies 3 or 4 years ago were still very early, first generation products, things like that. But what ends up happening is when you get large capacity on the truck, you ultimately then typically need to have large capacity for charging at the site. And what that ultimately means for an operator is that your capital costs are going to increase significantly. And what we typically find on the operations side, when you look at the data, a lot of the trucks end up coming back to the depot or the operating facility, and they have a meaningful percentage of their fuel or range left over. So I think what we like to say, bring it back to the beginning, is that the first step is really just identifying the use case that you're going to be using the vehicle for, and understanding what the operating conditions around that use case might be, both in terms of the operating hours, the operating distances, what types of additional conditions, like maybe idling time for drop-offs, pickups, maybe queuing at the port to be able to get the container, that type of thing. And then working with a partner who can help you translate those operating conditions into requirements for your power and energy needs, both on the vehicle side and then the charger side. I think the worst thing that you could do is, I think it was Lisa from Tom's that mentioned the savings potential on the operating side. The worst thing that you could do is, just make a knee-jerk decision to just size it for as big as you can go, which ultimately then means that you're eating into that savings potential that you would otherwise have gotten on the operating side. So it's really important just to start at the very beginning, just understanding what the use case is, and then working with a partner that can help you identify what the needs around that use case are, or a partner that can, maybe build into that for you, whether it's charging or, trucking as a service as well.
Thank you.
I'll pass it back to you, Bruce.
Thank you. And that's perfect. That's great advice. And again, we're not going to solve all your problems today, but you're going to hear the kind of things you need to think about, and you're going to get introduced to some of the people that can help you. I wanted to touch on something just really quickly, and also forgive me, I spent almost all of last week doing nothing but talking because I was at our carb booth at the Advanced Clean Truck Expo. So my voice is still a little shot. But, you know, I've heard a lot of different things about total cost of ownership. I sat in on various sessions last week at the at ACT. There were some large companies that, you know, that stated we're not seeing the TCO we thought we would. One thing that I found interesting is that out of all of the discussions I saw where someone would say we're not seeing the TCO that we thought we would, I saw no numbers whatsoever. There was another panel I sat in on with some smaller fleets, obviously not terribly small, and they started presenting numbers. And unfortunately, my boss had a slight emergency right in the middle of it. So I'm going from a little bit of quick memory of when I was sitting there watching it. But one of the companies presented numbers and said, you know, they're already seeing, they have Class 8 trucks and then smaller trucks. I didn't catch what class truck. They said in their Class 8 trucks, they're already seeing a negative 7% operating cost in their larger trucks. If I said that backwards, in their Class 8s, in their smaller trucks, they're already seeing a negative 10% operating cost. They expect that within, I think it was 3 or 4 years, to see a negative 30% operating cost in their Class 8s and a negative 40% operating cost in their lighter trucks. So when I hear numbers from people out there, I heard from City of San Diego not long ago. They were very positive on the operating costs for their trucks. So I want you to really think about that. I know they're expensive. Okay, no one in this room is going to say they're not expensive to get into if you want to buy. But again, there are other options. So now I'm going to turn to maybe I'll call her the star of the show, and that's not to take anything away from anybody else, but a fleet, someone that's really operating these things in real time out there in the world. So Alexa, that's of course you. There are certainly things that that are very different, as I mentioned. We've heard, do you need the longest range truck that you can get? Drayage, which your fleet represents drayage. I know I've talked to some drayage fleets, including yours. No, they don't necessarily look at those trucks that get a 300 or 350 mile range. Not all the time, or maybe they do. Depends on what they need. There are other things, such as you're not going to get the range that you need or that you think you're going to get unless you probably train your drivers how to drive these things. I've heard numbers from fleets of in excess of 20% additional range if you actually use the regenerative braking in your truck the way you should. Okay. I talked to one small fleet a number of times a couple of years ago, and I would say, you got to think about how your drivers drive. And every time I would say that, he'd say, yeah, I know we drive a little bit too fast. No, it's not just that. There's other things. I'd come back and say it again. I know we drive a little bit too fast. It's different. Alexa, what's the experience that NFI has had with these vehicles as far as actually operating?
Great question. So we've been operating the vehicle since 2019. We were, happy to be a part of the 2 pilot projects with 2 of the largest OEMs, Volvo and Daimler. So with the 2 of them, we also took on some battery electric yard tractors in that 2019 timeframe. And during those pilots hit a million zero emission miles. So it was definitely, hard work to get there, a lot of going back and forth with the engineers. And then, of course, the product was ready to go. So as we've talked about, TCO, right? We needed grant funding. So we were applying to different grant fundings. We have been awarded HVIP funding, but we also were awarded the JETSI grant. And I will say that that's not something that NFI is necessarily looking for the whole project looking to do again. And that's because we learned a lot, right? Infrastructure has its own, I don't even know what the good word to use is, but they've got a whole lot of problems that we don't necessarily, right? We don't have any expertise on. And there's other partners that we're looking to kind of move forward with in that regard, right? You've got public charging depots, and then you've got partnerships with your Prologis. So between those, that's kind of where we see it going. But to bring it back to the truck. So right now we're operating 60 battery electric vehicles out of our Ontario, California facility that we built with the JETSI project. So right now we have 10 350 kilowatt fast chargers powering those 60. And by the end of the year, we will hit 38 350 kilowatt fast chargers while also increasing battery electric trucks to 100. So one of my favorite examples that we were given at ACT Expo last week was, it really depends, just as Bruce was mentioning, on the driver itself, right? Are they using that regen braking? And then also what kind of, are we going up mountains or are we staying flat? So for a funny example that we kind of were working through is we had a customer that really wanted us to pull a dray load, normally a little bit longer than a dray load round trip would be, but we wanted to give it a shot. And there is quite a large hill that it had to get up, and we did get back, but we were at 3% charge. So not something we necessarily want, our drivers to do. But that's where we start, pinging Prologis, Forum Mobility, all of these different providers, and start looking for those different public charging stations, because, we're getting funding on the truck side to help there. They're going after funding to help create public infrastructure. So I think that, it's that double team approach. We're not even double. We've got, 18 different teams coming in together to try to get to this zero emission future. So I definitely think, it takes everybody here. And all of the knowledge is very helpful. But as for operating, you've got to know what your case is. You partner with a zero emission. You understand, these are the routes that we want to change into, kind of work through some of those different issues training the drivers. And, most of what we've seen is within a week, they're pretty much good to go. It's just different. As any changes, right, you're going to need a little bit of time to kind of adjust. So biggest things that I would say from our side is, if you're able to get in one, if you're able to start talking to different public charging infrastructure, see who's kind of got some different spots coming up near you where it could make sense. Of course, if you have a smaller vehicle or smaller fleet, it is easier to get that kind of power. But for us, pulling 7 megawatts of power, it's been quite the project. So I definitely, just get started is one of the biggest things I would say. So I'll stop there for a moment.
That was great, Alexa. Thank you. And again, you panelists are awesome. I swear I didn't share too many of my questions that much, and you're all setting me up great. But before we do that, before I get to my next question, Alexa, I want to turn back to you for just a moment. And again, anyone else, and say, I've talked to a drayage fleet. Honestly, I don't remember if it was you or one of your competitors. Specifically, I talked to them at a truck show a while back, and they were really getting the range. They had some longer range trucks. They were really in the real world getting the range out of those, not just what the manufacturer was telling us. Okay. But certainly a part of the mix that you should think about. And I was at an opening for the first cross-border fleet to electrify running between Otay Mesa, which is basically the Tijuana, San Diego area, and California. And they were mixing their fleet. They were going to use the zero emission trucks to do certain things or to do certain routes. They were going to use their diesel trucks or natural gas to do certain things. Alexa, do you guys have kind of a mixed fleet as well? Where, you're running maybe some trucks that get a 350-mile range. You're putting some trucks that only get a 150-mile range on different routes. And what are some of the advantages? And I'd really like to turn this over also to everyone. Lisa, great question for you probably, again, or anyone else. Chris, Ron, Jason, you guys all have experience with what your customers want. What are some of the advantages to not necessarily saying, okay, I got to get the longest range truck that I need? And I'll start with you, Alexa, because again, that's important to a fleet running these trucks.
Yeah. And mostly our fleet right now, electric vehicles are in our drayage. And that's because, as I mentioned, right, we've got that shorter range. And if you look at the other ports that we have throughout the country, we see that shorter range. So we're not interested in, getting a Tesla to run those routes. It's not necessarily, where we want to look, but we are looking to pilot and have a pilot scheduled with Tesla in the coming month to pilot our long range dedicated vehicles, our dedicated fleets. So it's a time and a place type of thing. And then another good thing with the ports is they've got hours, right? They're only open for a certain amount of time. So you've got a lot of charging time. Not that you want a lot of charging time. Somebody's got to be there or, kind of be able to manage that, but you have the time. So that's why those electric vehicles really fit for us there. But we've been running CNG since 2012. I wouldn't necessarily say that's something that we're currently still looking to add more just RNG specific trucks. And that's just due to the fact that they're not zero emission, right? So for ACF, those wouldn't end up helping our fleet. So that isn't something that we're looking forward to, but they just had a release at ACT Expo where it was a zero emission running off of RNG. I think it was some type of a hydrogen fuel cell. I'm not entirely too sure, but that's something where we would look because it is classified as a zero emission vehicle. That's where we want to go to align, obviously, with regulations. And then one other just truck that obviously we're looking into is that hydrogen fuel cell. Costs of hydrogen in California are quite high, so I'm not sure that the TCO will be there either. So right now, we're still exploring these different battery electric trucks that come up with that longer range because for us, we don't just have that dry edge piece of that short haul or that shuttle piece that we have. We also have some of those sleeper or long range dedicated miles. So we definitely, as public infrastructure builds out, that's where we're talking with different partners of, okay, this could be the spot that we stop at to get home, whether it's an opportunity charge or something of that nature.
Great, thank you. And you're right, hydrogen costs are very high right now. And a lot of what you'll hear in our infrastructure section or session and today has been aimed a little bit more at battery charging because I think a lot of the complexities are there, what you need to understand, the use of your truck and so forth. But there's a lot of money that's being put into hydrogen production, not only public, but private. So we think the price is going to start going down pretty soon. That's when the TCO will really change. I wanted to turn to a couple of our other folks about that very question, but I do want to make sure we have some time at the end for Q&A from the audience. But I want to turn to Jason, and again, maybe this also will go back to Ron a little bit, is, as I said earlier, a lot of you folks maybe aren't ready to buy a truck, but maybe you're in a situation where you got to start thinking about getting a truck, a zero emission vehicle. Prologis, you guys offer a lot of solutions that will help people if they, if they're not ready to jump into putting chargers in on site or whatever the case is. What's some of your advice, Jason, as far as things that folks need to think about as they go zero emission truck, and how can you or a company like Forum, I'll ask you, Ron, after that, help folks as they, I don't want people to think you just have to go out and spend a whole bunch of money on a truck and a whole bunch of money on infrastructure, because there are a lot of solutions. Jason, I'll turn it over to you for that.
Yeah. So, and I'll try and weave it into some of the previous questions that have been discussed. Kevin was talking a little bit about the, larger range battery capacity means larger charging kind of capacity requirements, right? And, we were just talking about this idea of, should we be focusing on long haul? It's 50% of, or about 50% of the on trucks or kind of the trucks on the road, right? So there's still a big chunk of trucks that are, more readied today, right? And if you think about the innovation we've seen over the past couple of years, if that's any indication of what's to come over the next few, I'm pretty bullish on our ability to get to kind of 100% fleet electrification, inclusive of long haul, even though we kind of say, well, are we ready today to solve long haul? And if we aren't, then this whole thing is uninteresting. But I think that's a misguided kind of viewpoint. But really to answer the core of your question there, Bruce, we've talked to hundreds of fleet owners and operators, big and small, and They often don't own the underlying real estate for where they would like to. So as Alexa was mentioning, she's talked about a lot of areas in and around the ports and some of the activity that she's doing to electrify there, some of the time overnight and that is available to her. But does she own all of those properties? Maybe some, but in this space, in the industrial space, it's more than, I would say, 90% of assets are really not owned by the kind of folks operating out of there, or maybe even more. So, now you have to think about your lease term. Do you have 3, 5, 10 years left on your lease? Knowing that the infrastructure itself that gets installed, whether it's level 2 for some overnight charging or for fast charging for maybe more throughput overnight, or for some of that opportunity charging, or to kind of augment some of the different routes, or more likely the combination of all of the above, those assets last for 30 years. It's really hard to make a 30-year asset pencil in 3 years.
Yeah.
So how can you, and I think that's where, when you talk about TCO, it's depending on whose mission it is to either promote or squash kind of this industry, they're going to take a cut of that TCO argument that's more favorable to kind of their narrative. So my narrative is, I want to activate this community. We see the opportunity, and we came to take a landlord real estate viewpoint where I can install something for, monetize it over 30 years, but across 3, 4, maybe 5 customers during that time. So that customers are looking to right size kind of their portion of that investment, versus trying to take that entire thing and fit it into 4 years left on their lease. So that's how you get to diesel parity from a TCO statement, in the conversion to what we do is and the way we do that is charging as a service, right? So we convert that entire investment into a kilowatt hour, and we sell that kilowatt hour kind of on a known quantity, so exactly what you're buying. So Alexa knows exactly what she's getting at her given facilities in SoCal. She's able to build that into kind of her financial metrics. And then if she's able to renew at that property, fantastic. We continue kind of the investment. If she has to leave, also no problem. We expect someone else to come in to have similar zero emission goals, given they're only going to get more and more stringent, and those requirements are going to grow. So hopefully that helps a bit, Bruce.
That helped a lot. That was the perfect way to answer that. You took my relatively too basic question and gave a great answer to it. Thank you, Jason. So we are getting a little short on time, but I want to ask a question, and I'm going to ask it of each of our folks. I said I was going to go to Ron after this. I'm going to go to him anyway, but I think the question will be really similar to, or the answer, whatever, will be very similar to this question. So the question I want to ask everybody, and let's try and do it in a minute or less. So I'm really going to put you on the spot here. What's the biggest challenge, and what's the best solution, or what is a great solution that you see coming? Ron.
Well, just to piggyback on the truck cost real quick, there are a lot of incentives out there. So that's the first thing, when the daunting truck cost, and some of them are stackable. They're from different agencies. So again, understanding that and learning about that is going to be a big factor, as well as the cost of capital and how you're going to finance or lease that truck. Infrastructure, it's all about utilization to get that cost down as well. So there are solutions out there. You just have to start digging in, like everybody's made a point to state, and pick these partners out, start to learn and educate yourself on all the options. And it's not so hard once you dig in. But that all being said, as far as the biggest challenges, I think we're going to have a panel after this on infrastructure. I think infrastructure, obviously, even if a truck is free and light and does everything you want it to do, without the infrastructure in place, you're not going to get anywhere. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is figuring out where you're going to be able to charge your truck and then starting to get into which truck you're going to get, how you're going to capitalize it and finance it, and then looking at the net numbers of your TCO and your expected cost based on your use cases. So all that process, the whole thing has its challenges, but with the right guidance, you can get down the pathway from start to finish.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Lisa, same question to you. Biggest challenge and solution?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is educating yourself. Understanding this technology is a value system that's like metrics, right? Understanding what a kilowatt is and a kilowatt hour. Those both create costs. The kilowatt hour is the energy side. And when you plug in and charge that vehicle, you're getting kilowatts associated with a rate design. So when you're running on your own meter, what does that mean, right? We all don't even probably know that from our own household, and then we just pay a bill. So I think if you could just get out of the mindset of trying to worry about the technical aspects and just drive the truck and learn from that experience, you'll find many, many things don't really change, except for you're dealing with a new behavior, which is called charging. Just need to plug that vehicle in. And I'll just kind of, give something to think about here. When I ask somebody, they're always worried about the range. I don't think range is really the issue. I think it's just getting on the road and learning what it can and can't do, because hypothetically, a driver is going to drive a shift. Let's say it's 10-hour shift. If I ask that driver, well, how many miles per hour do you drive? Let's just say he just says 50. All right. 50 times 10, 50. You do 500 miles a day? The answer is no. So what you can determine is there's many minutes in that day that driver has available, and determining how that route would support charging in between. If I plugged in for 10 minutes, at 350 kilowatts, you're going to find yourself getting a bump up of another 20 miles. And so when you start really get out of the math, just drive and create the behaviors, you'll find a solution is there for 90% of the routes. I kid you not. I've been doing this since 2015. So my hope is that, just start driving, getting out there and test driving. At Tom's Trucks, we actually have a new rental division that we opened up, and we call it our Try Before You Buy program. The innovative small electric fleet program is a program just for fleets. It also provides rentals daily, weekly, monthly. There are so many programs out there, you guys, just let you test without any investment up front till you get comfortable.
Yeah. No, and the whole idea of getting another 20 or 30 miles is something really critical. Everybody says, well, it takes me an hour and a half to charge my truck. You need it charged probably overnight, but it's a different style of thinking, how you operate. Zip in here, get 20 miles, get 30 miles. And pretty soon that truck with a range of 150 or 200 miles, if you just use the battery up, get you 350 miles. I am going to turn over to Chris and ask you the same question. Biggest challenge and a solution?
Thanks, Bruce. And I hope this isn't too redundant with the first two answers, but I would say, just from my experience, the biggest challenge is just figuring out first what you don't know. I think that's the first thing. So Lisa mentioned, things like power and energy and how that impacts you. And I think that's really important to just put a foot out there and start talking to people. When I started working with heavy vehicles on electrification back in 2015 as well, on the transit side, there was a lot of questions at that time as to how applicable battery electric vehicles were going to be for most of the routes. And I think a lot of the prevailing opinion at that time was that things probably weren't going to work. But of course, there's some early adopters, first movers. There's a lot of help out there to get them there, whether it's grants, incentives, partners, the vehicle OEMs play a role in that, the charger OEMs, the service providers. I think, again, just putting yourself, in that case, they were putting themselves in positions to just get the vehicles out there, get the operating miles, understand how the technology can work, and then use that information to help inform. And then as a community, in that sense, I think there was a lot of information exchange and knowledge that was put out there. So for the trucking side today, I think it's very similar and analogous. I think there's a lot of noise. There's probably a lot of ways that this can be overcomplicated. But I think putting a foot out there, trying to understand what you don't know, aligning yourselves with partners that can help you figure that out in the beginning. Zero Emission is one, but there are many others, companies like CalStart, HVIP programs, the utilities have lots of resources as well. There's lots of avenues in which you can get information to help inform just what do I need to know and how do I take that first step. So I think that's really encouraging. And I do see, fleets putting themselves out there. I think what Alexa and the team are doing, many other operators are doing as well, is very encouraging. And we should all learn from that and see how that can be adapted into your specific use case, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and you said maybe it was redundant. It's not redundant because it's the important thing, right? It is a new world. One of the things you mentioned, when you started in this, you didn't, it looked like things weren't going to work. If what you're hearing is something from a couple years ago, somebody said, yeah, I got this electric truck. I got in I don't know, 2022, and it's, got me hardly any miles or whatever. That's the Stone Age. I mean, this industry is growing so rapidly. I've been to the last 3 ACT Expos, and it just is stunning how much new stuff comes on board all the time. So it really is about finding out what's out there now. All right, I am going to turn over to Jason and ask you the same question. Biggest challenge and a solution.
Sure. I think the biggest challenge right now is uncertainty. And in the macro market, you have a presidential election and regulations being questioned in the courts, and that creates uncertainty for folks. And on the micro level, you have a job that has a new network of stakeholders to engage on the decision to go electric. So sustainability teams like Alexa on the call, and finance teams, legal, and so on. So what I do know to be the case is on the other side of uncertainty is going to be a continued movement toward a zero emission future, regardless of how those uncertainties play themselves out. So I think take a stand, be part of that solution today. I think be a champion inside your team. I guarantee it will advance your career, if nothing else. So even if your pilot efforts are super challenging, I think each challenge will make your learning that much more irreplaceable within your organization. So yeah, I would say jump in both feet and don't hesitate.
Thank you. And last, please, Alexa, what is the biggest challenge you foresee, and what solutions do you use for it?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest challenge, like everybody's kind of talking about, is the education, right? There's definitely information out there, but it is somewhat of an overload of info, can be when you're first looking into it. There's also so many acronyms. So, that's already a little bit of an issue because you're trying to figure out what they're even talking about. But biggest thing that I can say is getting partners that can help. So I'm talking about, right, grant writing, infrastructure, obviously, partnering with the right OEMs that you have a good relationship with, partnering with the zero missions to be able to kind of understand the data, right? This is completely new to, how are you going to dispatch? How fast is it charging, et cetera? Partnering with those public charging infrastructure teams. Jason mentioned the internal teams, right? So I'm talking about external teams. The internal teams are just as important, right? So getting your finance teams involved, even marketing and communications, like those types of things can help you out in at least providing value or showing value to be able to get, the okay to invest in this technology, due to some of those, non-monetary advances. So then the last thing, obviously, biggest challenge is the infrastructure, right? So, there's not necessarily in California, but in other states, there's lack of clean energy. In California, there's a lack of capacity to some degree, right? So looking into the future, right? NFI was able to, for our JETSI project, we have installed 1 megawatt of solar on our warehouse next door that feeds into 7.7 megawatt hours of battery energy storage. So that's more, to support our 350 kilowatt fast chargers. That isn't necessarily to turn it completely clean, but it's more to offset those costs of, peak time usage and all of that. And I can see Bruce shaking his head because that's where we talked about earlier, right? OpEx costs, we see them go down. And I am a fleet that we have seen the OpEx costs go down, but they're only going to go down if you are getting a good kilowatt hour price. And if you're charging at, peak time, then, it's just not beneficial. But where you could see a benefit is partnering with some of those charging providers and those public charging, because most of that's going to be peak time that you need some opportunity charging. And that's more of a flat rate model, or, can be in different models depending on how obviously you're planning to work with them. But I would definitely say get educated as much as you can and find the right partners.
Yeah, no, and peak costs, things like that, managing that, as I said earlier, it is a new world. I'm not gonna, stand up here and say, oh, it's all simple. There's so many complicated things, new things to think about, and there's a lot of folks out there to kind of help you. Our next panel, of course, is on infrastructure. Miriam, the host, is gonna have a big job because there's gonna be a lot of good questions. We're going to open it up to a little bit of Q&A from the audience right now. Tomi, so you know, we'll probably run about 5 minutes long. My producer back there, I mess with him. He hates me. I'm pretty sure. Don't do that. But we'll run a little bit long. I want to give you guys a chance to ask some questions of us. Open it up. We have folks with mics. Question over here, please.
Hi, good morning. Public charging stations were mentioned as a, like interim solution while we figure out some of the charging or infrastructure. Is there any resources available to locate where those public charging stations are, or how do you find out where the public charging stations are?
I'll just quickly, and then if anybody on the panel wants to jump in. Of course, we will be talking more about infrastructure specifically in the next panel. There are resources online. Somebody here probably knows better than I do. If you look at our truck stop website, just do a search for CARB truck stop. There will be information there on a variety of things. We're trying to make it a lot better. In fact, the person that just handed you the mic is trying to make it a lot better and easier to use. But we will try and lead you to all the resources we know about. But does anyone on this panel have a quick place to go? Or maybe we'll just leave it because I know some of the people on this panel are on the next panel also. Please.
Yeah, there's an advocate in the industry named Ollie Danner that started a website called ZEVs. So he's doing a great job in trying to collaborate and get that information out there so that you know who the providers are. And we're not heavily subscribed ourselves yet, even as much as some of the others in the space. But I think it's a useful tool, and others hopefully will develop like that, which could be used to find out where there are charging depots or stations available, and who different providers are that you can turn to. So that's definitely one resource that you can look.
And Ron, that's a super good resource. I'd suggest that as well. And then there's also, what you've seen in the light duty space with PlugShare and some of the work that they've done, I think has been, our business, Ron and my business, and kind of the discussion day will evolve into that, I think, over time. But right now you can imagine some of this, it's more onesie, twosie. And as far as like what's been developed and built. And so it is more relationship, I think, at this moment for kind of broader awareness of where those are. And then a lot of announcements get made when they come to market. But as you can imagine, these are some of the stuff that Ron's doing, that we're doing. It's a multi-million-dollar project where developing a site takes 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and making sure there's a lot of due diligence that we do, from getting entitlements and permitting and things of that nature, that I think lend itself to not stating everywhere where we plan to be, because we want to get clearer on when it's actually going to hit the market, and so get further along that development path. But you can always work directly with kind of the providers in the field to, I think, get clarity about where those assets are planned to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and Forum is doing a lot to expand their networks. You'll have another panelist on the infrastructure panel that is expanding their networks. There are even truck stops, traditional truck stops that have even pursued funding, even through federal grants, to start putting in zero emission chargers and get some experience. See a question? Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Lisa.
I was just going to add, we as a dealer, we also provide dealer driver training. So some of these other experiences that are necessary for you, those are part of the protocol that happens for training. And I think in the next panel, you'll hear a lot of solutions when it comes to what will be available. Some of our OEMs are also starting to provide this in your dashboard. So you'll have a link. The Ford does that. We've got Isuzu coming out this year too. So there's a lot of solutions that will be new to you, but that'll become part of the driver training.
And tell me, by the way, I am watching the clock, so. Yes, sir.
One of the solutions that are coming out that I've seen, I live in the Inland Empire.
There you go.
Yep. And out there is Watt EV. They're putting up depots for Class 8 vehicles. One is in San Bernardino, another one I've seen is in Paris. So they really are trying to be strategic as where they're placing these charging stations, because they do understand the industry that they're in and the customers that they're trying to reach. And I always like to say, from this industry, we're all agents of change. We're all here to make sure we're getting over that Rogers curve of adoption, to bring it down and make sure everybody has infrastructure and charging in place. So those facilities are out there. Plug Share is a great app to use. I use that one all the time. And I'm a big fan of Electrify America too. So there's a lot of EV charging stations that are out there. You just got to know how to find them.
And you can hear me stand up here all you want and say, hey, it's really growing, because I happen to see a lot of that data come through. But it is really growing. Just, watch your local area. As the gentleman back there said, he's even seen some around. It's growing rapidly. Any other questions? Oh, did we?
Alexa.
Good morning. The question actually I have is, are state agencies eligible for grants and startup costs?
So you know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you to ask that in just a moment. But Alexa, I'm sorry. Alexa, you wanted to say something.
It's okay. You're good. Now I forgot.
Oh, that's all right. So you wanted to know about grants and I'm sorry, please ask that again.
Are state agencies eligible for grants and
Yes.
startup costs?
When you say startup, they are eligible for grants. Now, I'm not going to speak for the California Energy Commission. The California Energy Commission are the folks that oversee infrastructure and the incentive fundings for that. Are they eligible for grants for vehicles through our programs? Yes, they are. When you say startup costs, though, what specifically, other than a vehicle or?
It would be basically the vehicles and also the infrastructure for putting in. So
again, the next panel will probably know a little bit more about CEC for sure. Well, I'm fairly certain.
Yeah.
We probably know right now.
Yeah, the programs do correlate together. As a fleet, if you buy realistically 2 trucks, SCE would pay for the infrastructure, and they give rebates on the equipment. Energize can stock it. So there's many solutions, I'll tell you guys out there, especially for small fleets and certain types of vocations. So your dealers can help you with that. The different OE providers here can help as well. So there's lots of solutions.
To make a comment, it's more of like kind of going back to what we just talked about as well, is it's that information overload, right? What kind of incentives can I get, and where's the public infrastructure? All of that, to even on my side, right, is almost an information overload. So I think some of those different methods that we use are very helpful. It's just, got to find that right partner that can kind of guide me through it, at least for this first transition, would be my 2 cents.
And I said we're not going to talk today. We don't have a real session on infrastructure, but I'll throw out a couple things along these lines. That's absolutely right. There are so many sources. Your local air district, okay? For those of you that are down here, SoCal, South Coast, your local utilities, many of them, at least all of the 3 big major, what are called IOUs, investor-owned utilities, have programs that will help you. A lot of the POUs, I come from Sacramento, we have SMUD. It's a publicly owned utility, so it has an elected board and so forth. Many of those have programs, federal government programs, state programs. The ports have programs. So there's a lot of places that you need to look. And again, we're trying to consolidate many of them on that truck stop website. It's a big job. Ask around and find your experts. We're going to take one more question from the audience. Right here, sir. Thank you, Melissa. Oh, whoever beats him. Yep, Melissa's going to make it there first. Oh, we had one more. Okay.
So I have a question about how does the EV truck impact the payload? I mean, just in general, right? The batteries are extremely heavy, and you're reducing your payload capacity. You know, what is that? What have you guys heard, at least in particular, Tom or yourself? Excuse me.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So that's a great question. Specs are always available to us as far as on our each of our vehicles. I'll kind of just go through. Isuzu's done something really creative, I thought. They've got 5 different types of design for their electric truck. It's going from a 50 kilowatt hour battery pack size all the way up to 180 kilowatt hour battery pack size. And of course, within that, you're going to get from a 9,000 pound payload all the way down to maybe 11,000 or all the way up to 11,000 pound payload, depending on the battery pack size. So it does play a part. And of course, the range is a direct a result of what you're going to end up with based on battery pack size. So the point of that design is no different than getting out on the road and figuring out what works for you, is understanding what that route is that you're going to use it on, understanding what the payload is that you want to drive it on. And I will tell you this, every single day with this technology change, there is a concession that you're going to make. It is not going to be business as usual, as we're hearing today. So be open-minded, but when you will say 50 cents a mile, I guarantee you'll think about 50% a mile. You'll be thinking differently about how much you really do appreciate the change. And it's much easier than it sounds, but I think it's all about just getting started so that you're comfortable.
Were you referencing Class 8 in particular, maybe?
Yes.
Okay. The current EV weight ranges that, from my understanding, is 21.8 up to 29.5, depending on the OEM for battery electric. Obviously, that's 5 to several thousand, 5 to 10,000 more than typical diesel. So yeah, there is a weight consideration. The gross weight allowance for zero emissions is at 82, so they're giving you 2. It's not enough. We really need that to be higher to be really get things in parity. So for now, the good news is you don't have to flip your whole fleet over in one day, though, or 1 year. You're able to look at your lighter freight mixes and those duty cycles that can fit to get started. And hopefully, as you transition over the next 5 to 10 years, those restrictions change and the technologies change that reduce weight in the trucks to where you can get more parity with diesel and have everything work out easier down the road. But to start, you have to keep those things in mind and strategize accordingly, pretty much.
And we are really out of time. I know there's probably some other questions and some other comments, but we do need to move on. But that is also, I will say quickly, another reason to look at the battery size you need. Lighter, fewer kilowatts, lighter battery, cheaper battery. Do you need the biggest battery? As Ron said, they also give you a 2,000 weight allowance on the top end to 82 instead of 80. All right, everybody, we're going to take a 15-minute break. Which will run a little bit long, so that clock's 5 minutes fast over there. Be back here about 10:20. There's a lot of vendors out there. Please go talk to them, some trucks if you want to take a look. And thank you all very much. And we'll have our next panel on infrastructure in about 15 minutes or so. And thank my panelists. You guys were awesome, by the way.